every action um to them.
All right.
That's all.
All right. Anything else?
Not at all.
Any questions?
No,
No question. Anything that was confusing yesterday?
not at all.
All right. Sarah, you want to give me your journal response?
I don't have any question.
You want to give me your response from your journal?
Yes, according to the yesterday's one about listening, um, when you said we should let the students listen to the context, we have to let them also get a little bit into critical thinking on their own, so they can give you feedback according to what or how they understand, like how now we are doing, giving a feedback on how we understand it on our own words. So it's the same with the students we deal with, to let them use their own words to describe or explain about what they just heard during the class or during the listening.
Okay. Anything else?
No, nothing else.
Anything that wasn't confusing?
No.
Anything that was confusing? All right. All right. All right. Sharon, I think maybe she has bad internet. All right. Today we're going to talk about teaching speaking. Okay. Yesterday we talked. I mean, teach. Yeah. Yesterday we talked about teaching listening. Today we'll talk about teaching speaking. Sharon, what we normally do in the beginning. How are you? First of all, can you hear me?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right. What we normally do in the beginning of our
Yeah.
course.
Yes, yes.
Okay. What we normally do in the beginning of our course is read a journal. So we have a you'll take notes as we
Okay.
as basically our lecture. And I ask you some questions time to time, and you take notes, and then you're going to read the pages from the text, and then from there you're going to fill out every day a
Okay.
journal page. You're going to complete a journal page. There's two questions on the journal page. What did I learn today? And how could I use
All
it in
right.
and how can I use it in my teaching? Okay. And so in the beginning of every session, I will ask you to give me a journal response. You can give me a response, you can ask questions. So there's a time to ask questions about anything that may have been confusing, maybe in the book or something I said yesterday or the prior day. Or you can take the time to talk about if you disagree with something. That's another thing too. If you disagree with something I say, then the journal time is a good time to to state your case. I disagree with this because one, two, three. Or I didn't understand this, or this is what I learned. This is how I might use it. Okay. Um,
Okay.
so that's what we do in the beginning of every session. Okay. Um, so what we're going to do is I'm going to recycle you to all the classes that you miss. You're going to get. So don't worry about it. All right. You got it, Sharon? All right. Um, before we get into today's teaching and speaking, I want to say this. Be very careful of uh, uh, things that you see on social media regarding teaching. LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram. There's a lot of phonies out there. There's a lot of people, and let me be fair. I think some people, their heart's in the right place, right, and they want to share something. But just be careful, because a lot of times people are, when it comes to teaching and learning, they are operating and they're motivated by their emotions and not by the evidence. Remember, we said the several classes that we must be what? Data driven. We remove our emotions from teaching and learning. All right, you don't think emotionally. One of the things I don't like about some places, it doesn't just happen here in the Middle East or Saudi. It happens a lot of places. A lot of schools say, "Oh, we want somebody like a mother." No, you don't want to be. You don't want to take on that type of role. And being mothers are great. Being fathers are great. That's all great. But you're not there to be a learner's mother or father. You're not there to be their social worker. So these are things that you hear a lot. Oh, teachers are everything. No, you're there to do what, Sarah? To help them, give them a piece of some knowledge that's going to help them be able to solve problems in the future. That's what you're there for. You're not there to be a police officer. You're not there to be a social worker. You're not there to be a counselor. You're not there to be a therapist. There are people who have those roles. Let them do their job. You do your job. That's number one. Our job is to collect data on our students, research, plan, and then execute through instruction. That's our only job. Okay. So the more you know about teaching and learning, the more when you hear nonsense on social media or wherever you hear the nonsense, even sometimes in a professional development in school, you'll be able to say that's nonsense. No, I'm not asking you to go and argue with people, but what I'm asking you to do is have enough knowledge where you can recognize teaching and learning nonsense. Because there's a lot of people out here that will say things just for likes or because they don't want to do the hard, heavy lifting of teaching and learning. Teaching is hard. Anyone who says teaching is easy is a fool. And if they are teachers, they're doing it wrong. Teaching is very hard. Why? Because you never master teaching. There's no such thing as a master teacher. You can be a master instructor, I guess. But we talked about the first day, the difference between teaching a teacher and an instructor, right, Sarah? But from a teaching standpoint, there's no master teacher. Why? Because every year you get a different group of students who are different. And you got to figure out their wants, needs, expectations, what's going on at the time. If you've been teaching 25 years and you've been teaching the same way for 25 years, that's horrible. And you most likely have done your students a disservice. There's a difference between instruction and teaching. Teachers, our primary job is to help, not develop, but help develop someone who can solve their own problems, solve their problems in the future. That's kind of my introduction statement. All right, teaching speaking. Teaching speaking is an integrated process. So think about it like this. Every opportunity you get, regardless of what you're teaching and who you're teaching, every opportunity you get to have your learners, the people in your class, whether they're kids or adults, teenagers, preteens, elderly, Every opportunity, whether you're teaching math, English, Swahili, history, Russian, whatever you're teaching, calculus, to get your learners to talk to one another as much as possible. Your ultimate job is to talk less and have your learners talk more. Have them use the language. Talk more, do more. Talk more, do more. Have them talk about it, do it. Okay? So understand that teaching, speaking is an integrated process. Speaking is not an activity unto itself. So you're not going to have a speaking class per se. Everything's a speaking class. You know, sometimes universities have a course, a speaking class, oral, we call it oral skills in my university. It's nonsense. We don't really need it. Every class they attend should be oral skills. So that means if we go back to the lesson plan, and I'll pull that up again. Let's go back to the lesson planning on the screen. So we go back to this lesson plan, right? From the greeting to the warmer to the control practice, vocabulary expansion, listening activity, reading, all of those activities in some way require speaking. Even the communicative activity. They require the learner to speak. Now, it's going to be every activity in this case because, again, as we said yesterday, this is an ESL course. Obviously, it looks different for math. It looks different for other subjects. But even in math, you want math and other subjects, you want students to speak, to talk and do. Okay? If it's a language arts class, there should be a lot more talking. Okay? Your job is to reduce your teacher talk. All right? If at the only time where you talk a lot is when you're introducing a new unit. So the first or second class when you're introducing the new unit, you're going to probably talk a lot because the students don't know a lot about the unit. But after the first, second, or third day, you should begin to reduce your talk. So maybe you talk 80% of the time on the first, second, and third day of a unit. The next couple of days you talk 60% of the time. The next couple of days you talk 40% of the time. I mean, in a perfect world, by the end of the unit, the students should be running the unit. They should be running the lesson. And you talk maybe 5% of the time, and the students should dominate the lesson. Okay? That's in a perfect world. But the key is the more you talk, the less the students understand. Okay? A lot of teachers don't understand that. The more you talk, the less the students understand. And a lot of us teachers, educators, we're arrogant. We think just because we talk, the students learn. Dr. Diane Lawson Freeman, students do not learn because we teach. Dr. Diane Lawson Freeman, University of Michigan, rock star in language learning research. She also says that teaching does not cause learning. If anything, teaching interferes with learning. I know that makes a lot of educators mad. Teaching interferes with learning because, as we said before, you don't most of the things you learn in life, you don't learn in a classroom. You learn in real time by doing it, trial and error. So then, we put these kids in a classroom 7 hours a day in an artificial rectangular box with a door and a couple windows, and then we expect them to learn something when that's not an actual living classroom. So if we have to, by law and by culture, have these kids go to a schoolhouse and put them in a classroom, we need to make it as unartificial as possible. And that's by getting them to talk as much as possible. Okay. So in a language art class, the warmer should be speaking activity, the modeling and context, the control practice, all these things you should think about having your students speak. And again, I just want to emphasize control practice is when the teacher models and controls every aspect of what the students do, giving clear instructions. And as we get deeper and deeper in the lesson and deeper in the unit, then the teacher takes less control. Okay. Remember, when you're teaching speaking, you have to give them inputs and context. So you have to set them up so they'll be able to give you a response. So they should know the quicks, right? The key words and context. They should have the vocabulary. They should have some knowledge. So again, speaking is not an activity within itself. It's integrated in other things that you do. So if I'm doing a listening activity, that listening activity will have speaking in it. If I'm doing a reading activity, there's going to be some opportunities for the students to speak. If I'm doing a writing activity, there's going to be some opportunities for the students to write, for the students to speak about what they're writing about. Okay. The key here is to use every opportunity to get the students to talk as much as possible. A lot of times teachers wonder why students talk in class. Students often talk in class because teachers don't give them an opportunity to talk. The teacher want to talk 90% of the time. And then when it's time for the students to say something, it's a controlled answer, right? We ask a question and we're looking for a specific answer, and we never give them an opportunity just to give their thoughts about something. We don't ask them what they feel about something, what they observed, how would they do it differently, right? But we wonder why students are on their phone, talking in class, want to go to the bathroom, want to roam around the classroom. We wonder why these things happen because you're not giving them the opportunity to be a part of the learning experience. Remember, teaching and learning is not arguing with your husband, where whoever talks the most wins the argument. That's not what teaching and learning is. Method always submits to learning. Okay. So it's okay for you not to speak a lot. A lot of times teachers think they have to talk in that if they're not talking, that dead space is painful or bad. No, it's not. Sometimes dead space is good because it gives the students an opportunity to think. Okay. All right. So that's why the teacher paradigm is important. Teacher, 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 student, student, teacher, student, student, class. That's why that's important, because that you can use that paradigm to encourage speaking in a, but that's more going to be more for control practice. Okay, but that encourages to speak them to speak. You can use the listening activities that we talked about. I gave you several activities yesterday that will encourage them to speak. The dictoglass, the grids, right? That's not as controlled, right? So we're going to take them from control to independence to agency. We talked about agency yesterday. Make sure that when you are trying to elicit a speaking or a response from students, that you give them all the necessary considerations, give them opportunities, give them something to chew on, so they can give you a good response. If you if you don't give a lot of opportunities or considerations, what's going to happen is students are going to look at you like, huh, what? And then that's what happens. What happens is the one or two students in the class dominate the lesson, right? Because you're always going to have 1, 2, 3 students who want to participate, who want to come up with ideas, but then they dominate because the rest of the students, you didn't give them a lot of considerations. The question that you asked was too broad or too obscure or too vague. So make sure that you are very clear in what you're asking and that you give considerations and inputs for them to give you a good response. Also, if you want a great response, model the activity first or model the response first. Okay. Let's say we are in a social studies class and we're talking about global warming, right? We're talking about global warming, right? And the teacher says, all right, class, I want you guys to tell me what you feel about global warming. What do you think is going to happen most of the time if a teacher starts off a lesson like that? All right, class, I want you to tell me what you guys think about global warming. What do you think might happen?
The students wouldn't have anything to say because they might know little or nothing about the topic.
Yeah, they're gonna. Most of the students is gonna look at you like you're an alien, right? You're gonna have maybe 1 or 2 students that know a lot about global warming, maybe even very passionate, and give you a response. But you're not gonna get a large response from most of the class. Okay. But if you set it up and you context and you show them a quick video, right? You should give them a listening activity, right? You define global warming, right? Your classroom is set up for where there's pictures about global warming, right? And then you stand in front of them after doing all this context setting, do the warmer, do the control practice, and you say, because if I'm asking them what they feel, that means that's a more of an independent statement, right? It's a statement that's coming from them. So I will have to, after doing the control practice about global warming, right? Doing the vocabulary expansion about global warming, and now I'm asking this independent question that's a higher order question. I'm going to model teacher again, but it'll just only be teacher, right? And I would just say, I do not believe that global warming truly exists because there are some scientists who say that the earth It's just going through a natural warming cycle, and there's nothing wrong with what's happening. This is a part of Earth's natural warming cycle. So I model that. So now I could say, do you guys believe that? Now the students can go, ho, Dr. Ray. Hold on a second. On TV last night, I watched this thing, I read this thing, they said global warming is going to kill the earth. I don't know what you talked about, Dr. Ray. No. And that's more likely to elicit a response. All right. So I give my thoughts on it. I model it. And sometimes it's even good for the students to see you think about your answer. Let me see what I think about this. Right? And then it can help elicit more impactful or meaningful responses from students. Okay. So make sure you give them considerations. Also, be sure to use their existing knowledge. Again, as you said, Blessing, if they don't know anything about global warming and you ask them a question about something they know nothing about, you're not going to elicit any type of response. Okay. Again, I cannot emphasize enough, context is key. Making sure they have a vocabulary that elicit that will produce that will help them produce a good response is key. So this is how we know that lesson planning is important, because I got to do a lot before I ask them about what they feel about global warming. I have to do a lot of setup in future classes. Right? There's a lot of things that go on beforehand that get us to this point where we can have a conversation about global warming. I just can't one day walk in the classroom like, oh, okay, boys and girls, we're going to talk about global warming. What do you feel about global warming? We have to have had done a lot of things in previous classes to get us to this point. Okay. Just keep that in mind. That's why lesson planning is important. That's why scope and sequencing is important. Everything needs to be connected. That's why we backwards map. We start with the end of the year. When we're planning, we start with the end of the school year first. Why, Sarah? Why do we start with the end of the school year first? You're on mute.
The question again?
Why do we start with the end of the school year first?
Why do we start with the end of what?
The school year first when we're backwards mapping. Remember, we talked about backwards mapping. So why do we start with the school year first? The end of the school year first?
I don't understand. Can you?
Okay, so remember when we talked about planning, we said that we're gonna do the yearly plan first. And when we write that yearly plan, what are we considering? Remember we said what we're considering?
Yes.
What we want the learner to what?
Minutes.
Go ahead, Blessing.
Can I try?
Yeah.
Is it by knowing what the students have already learned?
No, so when we're backwards mapping, we want to think about what we want the student to be at the end of the school year. What do we want them to know? What should they be able to do? Right? Because again, we're developing a lifelong learner, and we're playing a part in that development. So by the end of the school year, what should that student know? What should that student be able to do? What type of problems can that student solve? Real authentic problems. So when we plan, we start at the end of the school year, imagining based on our standards, imagining what the student will be like. And then we backwards map, meaning we create a plan from day 180, day 179, 178, 177, all to day one. So day one is the last thing that we consider, but it's the first thing that we do. It's called backwards mapping. All right. So we start with the destination and we figure out how we need to get to that destination. Backwards mapping. Because if we front load, if we start with day one first, we end up getting lost regarding where we want the student to be. And that's what most schools do. They start day one, you do weekly plans, yada, yada, yada. And then at the end of the school year, we're not sure where the student should be because we never really consider the destination in the beginning. Right? I gave the example, when you plan a vacation, what do? You figure out where you want to go first, right? You got to make a decision. I want to go to Jamaica. I want to go to Maldives. I want to go to Thailand. I want to go. And then once you figure that out, then you start backwards mapping. Okay, we got to get a hotel. We're going to do these things, yada, yada, yada. Right? And then based on that, then basically when you make all those decisions, then you decide what you need, what clothes you're going to take, right? What luggage you need, right? You can't decide what clothes you're going to take until you know where you're going, right? You're not gonna book the taxi to the airport until you pay for the ticket and know what time that the flight leaves, right? That's backwards mapping. You're not gonna decide what time you need to get up for the airport until you book the ticket, right? So you backwards map. When you book a vacation, you backwards map. Same thing you need to do when you in teaching and learning. Backwards map. Always thinking about what am I trying to produce at the end of how should the student look? What should they be able to do, think, know? What problems should they be able to solve by the end of the school year? We got to keep our eyes on the prize. Okay. Teaching, speaking. Make sure that you try to use pictures as much as possible. Videos, listening prompts. Pictures are very powerful. Drawing. I always say the teacher should be semi good artists. Don't need to be perfect artists, but being able to go on the whiteboard and draw something, draw a desk, draw a book, or something like this. Some basic drawing skills, because pictures are very powerful. And if you like me, that can't draw a lick, then have download images, right, already on a USB on your cloud in your Google Drive, and have those pictures available for the students to look at on the whiteboard. Pictures are good resources to elicit responses. Okay. Don't be afraid to ask students the same question in different ways. That's called iterative. Okay. Make sure you preview the question. Try to, just like when we talk about listening, preview the questions, front load the questions. Give the students opportunity to predict. Remember, we talked about prediction yesterday? Prediction is a great way to get students to talk. We love to, something about human nature, we love to predict. The key here is whatever activity you're doing in class, give the students the opportunity to talk about that activity, or talk or do something where they're speaking. Also, like yesterday, go from what? Easy to difficult. So start with easy questions, and as you build more and more confidence in the topic, then you ask the difficult questions. Don't start off with a difficult question. Go from easy. This is another benefit of the warmer, even though the warmer doesn't really have to be connected, but start easy. Okay. Iteration. Do you know what I mean by iterative? ITERATIVE. Iterative. Do you guys know that word? What is an iteration? You know what an iteration is? You guys, anybody know what an iteration is? Know what an iteration is? All right. Teaching iterations is nothing more than doing the same thing in in a different way. Okay. Remember I talked about the lady educator, Dr. Diane Lawson Freeman. And she has a theory in teaching called complexity theory. And what she says in complexity theory is that the world is chaotic. Right? The world is full of chaos. All right. That means, remember, I think we talked yesterday about utterances. That means we don't know what will happen at any given time. This is why our job is to help students solve problems. Right? And the way we can help them solve problems in this very chaotic world, right? Well, let me make sure that you guys agree with that. Is the world chaotic? Is life chaotic? Anybody disagree that life is not chaotic? Right? No, the life is chaotic. We don't know. Nothing's guaranteed, right? There's nothing that's guaranteed. We don't know what may happen from one moment to the next, right? We don't know. Life is chaotic. Regardless if you're rich or poor, nobody has control of life, right? You could be the poorest person in the world, you could be the richest person in the world. You can think that you know it all. No one has control of life. Life is chaotic for us all. That's a life experience. So what what Dr. Freeman said, she said that as teachers, what we can do is we can help prepare students for the chaos by doing three things. Making sure that when we go out to teach, whatever we give the students, we do it in using iterations. All right. That is iterative, meaning when you when we talk about speaking, we're going to try to get them to speak in many different ways using different contexts, in different scenarios, in different ways, using iteration. Speak to the class. All right. Speak to social media. These are what we call modalities or modal learning modalities. We do the same thing in writing, by the way. Speak to your class. Speak to your next door neighbor. Speak to me. Speak to your parents. Do a social media post, right? Make a song. Can you write a song about it? Right? Do a documentary. Do a podcast, right? Different modalities where they're speaking. Hey, can you learn how to sign it? Even though sign language is not speaking, there's a form of nonverbal communication that replaces speaking. This is what we would call iteration. Getting your learners to do to do something or the core skills different ways. What are the core skills? Speaking, listening, reading, writing. They're the core skills for us all. They're the primary skills. Okay, so you got iterations. She also says that we should teach learners how to be adaptability, how to be able to respond to different situations. This all goes to ultimately problem solving. Because ultimately, that's our job as humans, to solve problems, to make life better for the next generation of people. So adaptability, teaching students that there's not just one way, that life is not going to just be one way, that you got to be adaptable, right? Game theory, the best way to change the rules is by playing the game. Adaptable. Everything in life is adaptable. Everything changes. Nothing remains the same. That means people have to be adaptable. So a part of intelligence is adaptability. A part of intelligence is being able to adapt. Animals that have the inability to adapt will eventually become extinct. Any animal on this planet that does not have the ability to adapt will become extinct. So our job as educators is mainly keeping the human race going, teaching people how to solve problems in iterative ways so they can become adaptable. So we have to teach students adaptability. Now, adaptability can be difficult. Why? Because going back to what we talked about in the brain, that RAS, what's that? What's your brain? Let's start real quick. Your brain is a pattern seeking device. Your brain enjoys patterns. Because your brain enjoys patterns, that's why you like to play puzzles and video games, right? Because your brain enjoys patterns, it can also get stuck in its own way, stuck in its ways, stagnant, inactive, not innovative. And that's a bad thing. So we have to condition our brains to be adaptable, to know that there's many different patterns, not one or two patterns. Right? You ever met somebody who just only want to do something one way, they're just not adaptable, right? That's a lack of intelligence, actually. Right? And when I was in the military, We used to have this thing called Murphy's Law, right? Murphy's Law. You know, and that's not Murphy's Law. My brain sometimes I think I'm AI. But Murphy's Law says anything that will happen could happen. That goes with chaos theory, but I can't think of it now. My brain is. But the whole key is you don't. If you go one way, you don't come back the same way you went. It's not Murphy's Law. My brain is. I'm having a brain cramp right now. But if you go one way, you don't come back the same way that you went because the enemy may be waiting for you. You always go a different way, right? That's adaptability, being able to adapt. And we must teach our learners. This. Okay. And then she also says that the learning must be. Where's my pen? I tell you guys, don't get old. What do I do? Okay, right here. The learning must be self-referential. Forgive my poor handwriting. The learning must be self-referential. Okay. And self-referential meaning learners need to be able to internalize what they're learning. Right? It needs to be self-referencing. This is why speaking is important. Getting them to speak about it is important. Because speaking is a self-referential act. And I'm talking about beyond control practice. Getting them to write about it. Having students to write journals, what they feel. See, I told you yesterday, I don't care what teachers feel, but I do care what learners feel. Because that's self-referential. I want to know what the learner thinks about their thinking. Think about what they're learning. That's what we call metacognition. It's called metacognition. When a learner starts to think about their thinking, think about their thinking. Think about their thinking. Did you guys have lunch yet? Huh? You already had lunch? Ray, did you have your lunch yet? Well, go and make breakfast. I don't want to hear your mother's mouth now. Go and get breakfast. All right. Think about their thinking. All right. That's what we want to do. That's our goal right here. Is metacognition. So as much as we possibly can, see these two help us move up Bloom's taxonomy. And sure enough, we'll talk about Bloom's taxonomy later. These iteration, adaptability, right? Iterative, lower orders, lower ordered activities. All these things help us move up the pyramid. Because up here is metacognition, higher ordered activity. And that's our job, to move up that pyramid. So as much as we can to get them to think about their thinking, make it self-referential, then we're doing our job as educators. And you can do that primarily through speaking activities. when I visit schools as a consultant and I walk down the hallways and I hear nothing but quiet during the school day. And sometimes I'm walking with the owner, sometimes I'm walking with the principal, sometimes I'm walking with the academic director. And they're proud a lot of times. Oh, you see how quiet and everyone's learning? No. No, I tell them no. I should hear a ton of noise. I should hear students debating, laughing, talking, screaming at one another. I should hear noise. I shouldn't see students quiet in their chair, listening to the teacher. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. That's not learning going on. That's instruction, right? That's students who are being bullied to be quiet because the teacher yelled and screamed at them, be quiet, shut up. I'm going to call your parent. Stay after school. Write your name on the board. Right? You got something to say, Blessing?
Yes, Dr. Ray. Please, if everywhere is quiet, how do we manage the class then? If everywhere is chaotic, how do we manage the class?
So, because it's going to be organized.
It's not
It's going to be when I say chaotic, maybe that's a bad word. What I mean is you can have organized chaos, right? Because remember when we're doing control practice, right? That's going to be student. When they're doing student class, that's a ton of noise. That's 18 people talking at the same time. And it can be controlled. And the teacher has complete control. Now there's a difference between students throwing candy at one another, screaming and fighting about who should have won the wrestling match in the WWE, right? And who's better, Drake or Migos, I don't know. That's the difference in that versus students making a lot of noise in a situation where learning is occurring.
I think the noise Mr. Ray means is the one when you walk around the school halls, you want to hear like students reading, answering questions, interacting with the teacher, and
Interaction with the teacher. But I need more than I need it to be natural. I don't need it to be
A one-way learning.
okay, Muhammad. Well, teacher, no, I need to say, hey, I don't agree with this. Well, I don't agree with you. Blah, 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 blah. We'll come to the board. All right. I need to see, because that's natural learning. When everybody's all, yes, well, that's phony learning. I need to see students getting upset. I need to see students laughing the same way they would learn on the street. That's what I need to see. Because what happens is when the students do this and it's a lot of phoniness going on, do you think that information is getting to the frontal lobe? No. You got a bunch of students who are going to keep the information in their working memory just long enough to do what? Pass the test. As soon as that test is over, that information is out and the information didn't get to the frontal lobe. Our job is not to get the students to pass the test. Our job is to get students to keep information that they want to keep in their long-term memory so they can use that information to solve problems in the future. The problem is we get satisfied when the student passes the test. Well, guess who passes the test? The students who cheat. And the more you get A's, the more you're likely to cheat. And this has been proven time and time again in schools and research. So you get the A student. A lot of times the A student are cheaters. You will notice that in life, most of the students who were C students and B students, they become the most successful students. Because the C students and B students didn't cheat. They accepted the 80. They accepted the 75, right? But the A student, once he get an A, he got to keep on getting that A. And whatever he needs to do to get that A, he's going to get that A. And in life, it doesn't work like that outside of school. In life, you can't cheat your way throughout life. Right? So that's my position for that. Does everyone agree with me? No. Listen, if you don't want a lot of noise and what perceives to be chaos, if you're an administrator, because you don't want to be, you don't know how to explain that. Right? And more importantly, I need to hire real teachers. If I'm not a real teacher and I don't know anything about teaching, what am I going to do? Sit down, be quiet. Sit down, be quiet. Do page 8. Give me the answer. Right, wrong, true, false. Do your homework. Anybody can do that. Any monkey can do that. I can hire any monkey to do that. Hello, class. My name is Dr. Ray. In my class, you shut up, you come in, you do your homework, you do your classwork, answer my question, you better be quiet. And if you don't do it, there's going to be consequences. I'm going to give you a 0. I'm going to call your parents. We're going to suspend you. Right? Now everybody's scared of the teacher. Scared of the teacher. And no learning going to take place. If I do that, what happens to the RES? Freeze, flight, fight. Yes, teacher. And they do it just enough to not to piss the teacher off. And no information is getting to the frontal lobe. Okay? So iteration, adaptability, self-referential is what Dr. Diane Lawson Freeman says we need to do as educators to help them become problem solvers in this very chaotic world. Okay. Final notes. All right. Students must be comfortable. To that point, your students must be comfortable. They must be prepared. Your job is to prepare them for speaking. Okay. Any questions about teaching and speaking? All right, I'm gonna slide into teaching reading now. Any questions about teaching speaking? All right, let's talk about teaching reading now. Teaching reading. Reading is a mystery. We don't know a lot about teaching reading the way we think we know. In fact, one of the biggest debates in pedagogy right now is the reading debate. And it has become a political debate. Now we know a lot more than we have ever known because of brain research. But there's still a major debate. It's called the reading wars. Balanced literacy versus the science of learning. Okay. There's a wonderful podcast called, what's the name of the podcast? Called Told a Story. The Told a Story? I think it's called, let me look it up real quick. If you get the opportunity to listen to this podcast, it will blow your mind. A story. Oh, Sold a Story. Yeah. Sold a Story. I'll put it in. Let's see. Sold a Story podcast. Sold a Story. Sold a Story podcast. I'll put the link in the Google Classroom. Sharon, make sure you text me your email so I can add you to the Google Classroom. This is where you'll find all the resources.
Okay.
Yeah. If you get an opportunity, I highly advise you to listen to this podcast. It will absolutely blow your mind about how we teach reading and the politics involved. And how people who know we're doing it, teaching reading wrong or inappropriately, they still teach it wrong because of politics. Mind-blowing. So this goes to prove that reading is a mystery, and it's political, and it's a shame because reading is the one thing a learner can do to become independent, to become self-determined, self-regulative, self-efficient, self-regulated rather. Okay. Reading, if you want to learn a language, read. If you want to learn about anything, if you want to build agency, read. Reading is so powerful. There's a documentary, and he's a famous journalist, British journalist. And he goes around and he gets people's stories, right? He does stories on and people life experiences. And he went to the Louisiana, I believe it was Louisiana prison. I think it's called Angola. Very tough prison in America. And he met this young man who was doing a life sentence. He's going to be in prison for the rest of his life for something he did at like 13 or 14 years old. He was convicted like at 14, 15. So this young man has been in prison all his life. And the young man was, I think he was late 20s, 30s at the time of this interview. And he was smiling. He was so happy. And the journalist was like, why are you so happy? Why is your spirit? I mean, you're going to be in this prison for the rest of your life. You are so happy. Like, I enjoy being with you right now because your spirit is so like full of joy. And the guy, without missing a beat, he says, I read. He said, man, I'm not in prison. Yesterday I was in Paris. He said, tomorrow I think I'm going to go and visit Australia. I'll be in Australia for about a week. Because he reads. That's the power of reading. And once you have that power, there's nothing that anyone can do to you. It's what we want learners to be. Unfortunately, this young man had to learn that from a prison cell. It's a shame that he wasn't given, or he didn't take advantage. I don't know if he wasn't given or he didn't take advantage of it, or no one nurtured him outside the prison, and that he had to learn that in prison. But that's how powerful reading is. I was reading an article about 2 years ago that says the average American college graduate does not read one book after college. Can you imagine? The average American college graduate does not read one book after college, after they graduate. So you tell me what the value of colleges, university, high school, and people who get 4-year bachelor's degrees, have they become self-regulated, self-determined, self-efficient? I don't know. Because we know the power of reading. So again, if we want to make that self-determined, that we want to spark metacognition, make learners self-referential, you got to get them to read. And they got to want to read on their own. I'm not talking about mandatory reading. So when you give them things to read, it has to be something that meets their wants, needs, and expectations. It has to be something that's interesting. And you have to be interested, and you got to get into the reading. You got to spark, you got to create spark. So that means you need to be an avid reader yourself. If the teacher is not an avid reader and doesn't understand the benefits of reading, how will that teacher cascade that down to her students? Just like, so reading is not as simple to say, open your books to page 148 and read the passage and answer the questions. That's not teaching reading. Teaching reading, just like teaching listening, is about preparing, just like teaching speaking also, is about preparing your students. You guys are seeing the reoccurring theme: preparing your students, preparing your students, preparing your students. When they read, we're going for a couple of things. We're going for making sure that reader understands the main idea. They get the gist. We talked about that word yesterday, J-I-S-T. Make sure they get the gist of what they're reading. They understand the main idea. That they understand and they know the Lexis. L-E-X-I-S, not Lexus like the car. L-E-X-I-S. Lexis are word chunks. Words, phrases, word chunks. Key to the reading. Because the best way to build vocabulary is through what? We talked about it the other day. Through what? Through reading, through telling stories. And then the third thing we want to happen is that the student understands the context. You have to, when you give the student something to read, you have to give them an expectation. You have to set expectations for every reading opportunity. You have to set expectation. You just don't say, read this book, read this poem, read this chapter. Because if it's somebody like me, especially if they're boys, young boys typically don't like to read. especially if something they don't know, have any interest in. So you have to prepare them for that. You have to get them interested. You have to be that spark. And you have to give them expectations. When you give a learner expectations of what or why they're reading, they're more likely to read it and understand it. You have to assess whether the learner is ready to read. Some people are not ready to read. Okay? Some people are not ready to read. When there's reading time, this is a time where it needs to be quiet in the classroom. Okay? If they're hyperactive, if they are running around, if they just came back from recess, if they're hungry, if they're angry, upset, they're not going to be ready to read. They have to be psychologically ready to read. So that means as a teacher, we got to assess that they're not thirsty, they're not hungry, they're not angry about something, they don't really want to go outside. Well, they always want to go outside and play, but they have time to let off some energy. Make sure they are psychologically and physically ready to read. They have to settle down and relax. Those hard ass chairs they sit in are not the best place for them to read. This is why I love kindergarten teachers, because we have kindergarten teachers have rugs and the bean bags, right? Kids can sit on the floor. So let me ask you this. If KG2 can sit on the floor and read and KG3, why don't we have seventh graders sit on the floor? You don't think a seventh grader want to sit on the floor and read? You don't think they want to sit on a bean bag, a sofa? All right. Just something to think about. I know the school is not going to let the eighth graders have a beanbag in their classroom, but there's something to think about. Maybe you ask your students to bring a pillow. Hey, today's going to be a reading. Tomorrow's going to be a reading day. Bring a pillow so you can get comfortable when you're reading. Just something to think about. Make sure that the reading is appropriate, that it meets their reading level. All right. Things that you need to consider is word count. Before you assign a reading, make sure it's something that they can reasonably read in a certain amount of time. You're not going to give them War and Peace or Moby Dick to read to a group of fifth graders. So make sure the language is appropriate. Okay. Make sure there is, especially that make sure there's a certain number of high frequency words. All right. So you have two types. So in vocabulary, you have two types of words. You have high frequency and low frequency words. All right. And you can actually go on Google, and Google will tell you there's whether a word is a high frequency word, low frequency word, where does it fall? Okay. So I'm gonna ask you guys a question. What is the most common word in the English language? And can anybody tell me? Can you guys hear me? What is the most common word in the English language? You know? You can turn your mic on. Anybody know? Can you hear me? Yeah, what's the most common word in the English language? No one knows? Take a guess. Guess.
Maybe yes and no.
Yes and no. Yes and no is high frequency, but it's not the most common word. Blessing, you want to try to take a guess?
I'm not sure. I'm thinking
Yeah.
come.
COME?
Yes.
No, not come. It is a high frequency word. It's not come. Sharon, you want to guess?
I.
No, that's a high frequency word too. The is the most common word in the English language. The makes sense, right? The is the most common word in the English language. So these are, you can look them up. It's pretty cool. And now you see how planning is important because we don't just assign reading. And this is one of the reasons, this is one argument for textbooks, by the way. This is one argument for textbooks. Is because the textbook should use language and high frequency words, make it appropriate. All right. So the textbook kind of already does this for us a lot of the times. So it's one less thing that we have to do. But if you're a teacher, you need to know, you need to still make that consideration because maybe the textbook is wrong. Maybe it's appropriate for third graders in America, but not third graders in what? Saudi Arabia. Huh? Appropriate for a fifth grader in London, but not a fifth grader in Riyadh. So these are the considerations that you have to think when you're using text. The word count. All right. If it's a lot of words, a lot of students are going to be put off by it. It's going to affect. It's going to affect their. It's going to affect their ability to read, because then you give them. They're going to have a certain type of anxiety about reading. You give them a whole bunch of words to read, a lot of pages to read. Right. So you got to consider that. So let's look real quick. You see the list of 1,200 high frequency words. You see that list? I'll put it in a Google Classroom for you. But the is number one. Of and is number 3. A is 4. 2 is 5. N is 6. 7 is, is a 7 rather. 8 is you. 9 is that. 10 is it. People study this, by the way. The 500 most frequent word is, what's 500? Is job. The 1,000 most frequent word in the English language is 1,000. Accept. Okay. So if you are a teacher and you're teaching A1s, remember we talked about the CFR? I'm going to create stories with what? These high frequency words first. Make sense? Make sense? I'm going to have a lot of high frequency for A1s, A2s. I'm going to have stories with the first maybe 100, 150, because these are the words they're most likely to hear often. Right? And then as they get build and build, I'll go further and further down up the list. Right? You can get 10,000. I think Google will give you every word and ranks every word for you. All right. So depending on your student's ability, you want to have them use high frequency words. High frequency words. All right. As the students are building their vocabulary and getting older and their skill level is increasing, then you can start introducing low frequency words. So Blessing, what do you think a low frequency word is?
I think low frequency words would be those words that we hardly see in a sentence.
Yeah. Words we don't use a lot. Right? Words we don't use a lot. Maybe they're in specific fields or they're just not common in a normal conversation. They're not common in the normal conversation. All right. So we'll start introducing low frequency words when the learner is building their vocabulary. But again, the best way to do that is through reading, right? But when we're introducing reading, the students are giving students reading opportunities. We have to make sure that the reading is appropriate. All right. So word count. How many words, how many pages can they read without losing their minds? Right. Another thing, reading is not a punishment. Right. Never assign reading as a punishment. All right. Or writing as a punishment. It should be enjoyable. So give them what they can chew, what they can eat, what they can tolerate. High frequency words. Then we have to make sure they are familiar with the context. All right. So once we consider that what they're reading is appropriate, right? We got to first. So number one, you got to make sure that the reading is appropriate. So appropriate reading. All right. What we consider here is what high frequency words, high frequency versus low frequency words. Right? We're considering what? Word count. All right. Another thing we're considering is word font, the fonts. Okay. For young learners and learners who are learning how to read, you want bigger fonts. Right? Big font. For more experienced readers, the font can get smaller. Huh? Make sense? So even if I have an A1, A2, and I'm teaching an adult A1, A2, and we're reading, I'm going to give him the same size font as I would give a KG1 or a KG2. Make sense? All right. The more experienced the reader, the more difficult the reading, the smaller the font can be. Make sense? All right. So these are the considerations. High frequency words versus low frequency word count, word font, and also the context. Context and theme. All right. So is the theme appropriate for the age group or for the knowledge level? Okay. These are things that that must be considered before you even start reading. All right. So next we're gonna talk. Then after you do that, make sure they know the context. Just like when we talked about teaching listening, we said we're going to listen to a audio about XYZ. You're going to do the same thing. we're going to listen to an audio about global warming. Okay. Global warming is ... And then again, the classroom has to be set up. There should be pictures on the walls, right? There should be things, pictures, visuals, stimuli. If you can get them to touch things. All this will what? Build context. All right. Situation, context is what? The situation the student understands. Situation the student can imagine themselves being a part of. All right. The context, the situation the student understands. The situation that they can imagine themselves being a part of. So if a learner cannot imagine themselves being a part of a certain situation, especially when they're in lower grades, don't give them that as a context. Now, upper grades, you might push it to get them to expand their thinking, critical think, but you still got to prepare them. Okay, if you have people, that have a religious belief, right? Don't try to shock them by having them read something that's against their religion or that's not part of their religion. All right, you can get to that point, but not in the beginning. So again, this is where knowing your learner is important. What's appropriate for your learner at the given time? Okay. So we want to set context, a situation that they can imagine themselves being in, a situation that they can understand, a situation that is compelling. Next, so that's number 2. I got to figure out how to. Number 2, we come on. Number 2 is context. So set the context. All right. Start with something. Start with something they already know. That's the I+1, right? Start with something they already know. This is why, out of all the Shakespearean plays, which one do you think high school kids like the most out of all the high school plays? Out of all the Shakespeare plays, what do you think? Which one do you think we normally start with? Hamlet, Julius Caesar, Romeo, Juliet. Which one do we always start with first? Anybody guess?
No.
Romeo and Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet. Why?
Romeo and Juliet is the
Why we start with that one first?
because I
Because
think it has a easy understanding. It's about a love
intimacy.
story.
It's about love and it's about family. It's about family and love, right?
Yeah.
These are concepts that a ninth grader, a 14, 15-year-old can understand versus trying to get them Julius Caesar or Hamlet first, right? They can understand love and family and beefing with your parents, right? Having an argument with your parents, right? They can understand that, right? Or they think they understand it anyway, right? So that's the one we tend to start with. So we start with something they already know. And so after we set the context, we ask, we front load questions. front load questions, just like in the listening. So before they even start reading, we're going to give them questions, right, about what they're about to read, right? And they can what? They can make predictions. They can make predictions, right? That predictions, they could talk about it. That's where you see the speaking activity. That's where speaking comes in. They're going to talk about their predictions. There can be communicative activities around their predictions. Okay. So you're going to front load questions. All right. The first question should be about what? The just first. Making sure they understand the main idea. All right. And just like in the listening, they're going to go back and read the same paragraph, the same piece of reading over and over again. So it gives them opportunities to reread. Okay. The key is you want to focus them on their reading. And this is the way you can get them to focus their reading, is through ask front loading questions, making predictions, make guessing. Okay. All right. Also understand that you can also teach, reading is the perfect opportunity to teach grammar. This is the perfect opportunity. If you want to teach someone grammar in an effective way, don't give them a grammar class. Just have them read. Because reading is going to have what? Good grammar. Should have good grammar. All right, depending on what you're reading, but should have good grammar in the reading. So you can point out grammar points through reading. Make sense? So if you want to teach grammar, do it through reading. And then you can point out the different grammar points. Meaning if they're reading a narrative is something that happened in the past. Narratives are a great way to teach past tense and the different forms of past tense. I'm going to tell you, if you try to teach the different forms of past tense by just having a class on past tense, it's confusing as hell. But if you do it through reading, something that you're already reading, then you can make the grammar point more effective. You can put a greater emphasis because now you're teaching grammar in context to what you're reading. Remember, everything we teach must be in context. And then trust me, if you try to give a class, and sometimes I'm forced to do it at the university, right? They have the grammar class, even though I don't teach grammar, but I kind of teach grammar from time to time. Well, I do teach grammar through the reading class, but it's not to be isolated. Grammar is not an isolated class. You teach it through listening, teach it through speaking, and you definitely teach it through writing. And you can make grammar points. Okay? The best way for someone to learn grammar is the modeling of it. This is why it is important that teachers have strong grammar. Because teachers have to model what they expect the students to do. Teachers have to model what they expect students to do. That goes back to the control practice, right? So for us, teachers have to model what they expect students to do. Keep that in mind. If you are using bad grammar, don't expect them to use good grammar. Okay? So you have to be very mindful of how you speak to students. The best way to teach grammar is by modeling good grammar and having them read. Okay? So just keep that in mind. All right, we need to stop there because it's 1 o'clock. I don't want to go beyond because I know you guys got other things going on. All right. Tomorrow we will finish teaching reading and go into teaching writing. Okay. We'll have for Sarah and you, Blessing, we'll have one more class on Saturday. Okay. That class on Saturday is going to be 5 hours, by the way, because I'm going to try to take care of everything. Unless you want to do another week, we can make it long on Saturday, or we can go into the next week. It's up to you. Because I want to cover the grammar boot camp and a couple other things on Saturday. So
Can we break it into two?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna give you break. I'm gonna give you breaks. We'll do 2 hours, 2 hours, and then 1 hour. I'll give you a break, or we can go into next week. It doesn't matter to me. We can go into next week, or we can finish on Saturday.
I'll prefer to finish on Saturday.
What do you think, Sarah?
Today, because I already told the school. I already took excuse for this week.
Okay. All right. So is that okay with you, Sarah?
Yeah.
All right. And then Sharon, we'll start back up on Sunday. But you're gonna attend this one on Saturday also, Sharon. So we don't have to do it again. All right, we'll stop there. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 11. We'll finish up teaching reading. We're going to teaching writing. And then tomorrow we'll also go over noticing errors. Noticing errors. All right. All right. See you guys tomorrow.
Thank you. You too. Bye.